Welcome to the Learn Medical Spanish podcast and YouTube channel. Today I'm going to go over some medical specialties or medical specialists, depending on how you want to look at it. So this is kind of geared towards the emergency room if you're doing discharge instructions, telling the patient where to follow up. But either way, you can learn quite a few different specialties here. So I won't go over all the specialties because there's a lot, but a lot of the common ones. So I'm going to say them in English first. And then I'm going to give you a chance to think about the translation, and then I'll say the phrase in Spanish, and I'll say it 2 times total in Spanish. So each time when I say it in Spanish, I'll pause so you can think about the translation. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start by telling the patient what the purpose of this is. We're telling them where to follow up. For example, if they're in the emergency room and they have a broken arm now, and we want them to follow up with an orthopedist, or anything else like that. So the first phrase is, it's important to follow up very soon with. So go ahead and think about how to say that in Spanish. Es importante dar seguimiento muy pronto con. Es importante dar seguimiento muy pronto con. So the second time I said it a little bit quicker, so you hear a little bit more of a natural way of delivering it. But let's break that down just a little bit. So you can probably easily tell the beginning means it's important, es importante. And then the next phrase, dar seguimiento, means to follow up. It's like to give follow-up is kind of a literal translation. And then the part that's in parentheses that says muy pronto means very soon. So you could leave that out and it would still make sense. And then the last word, con, means with. That's a really long phrase, so I just thought I'd kind of break it apart. But let's move on to the next part. So we're going to start a list of specialists now. So the first one is a primary care doctor. So how do you say that in Spanish? Un doctor de cuidado general. Un doctor de cuidado general. And certainly there are other ways to say that, but that's one that's pretty straightforward. Next, a neurologist. Un neurólogo. Un neurólogo. So that's kind of a mouthful. Take a little practice, but you can slow it down and kind of practice your pronunciation by reading things really slowly. If you're looking at the text, either on YouTube or on my website, you can look at the text and read it really slowly, like neurologo, and just go as slowly as you need to kind of get all those vowel sounds figured out, and then gradually speed up. Next, an eye specialist or ophthalmologist. Un especialista de los ojos, oftalmólogo. Un especialista de los ojos, oftalmólogo. So you could use this same structure to kind of simplify a lot of different specialists. You could just say, un especialista de, a specialist of whatever, right? Un especialista de los huesos would be kind of a very layman's way of saying an orthopedist, right? Like a specialist of the bones. So with that patient that has the broken arm and you wanted to see an orthopedist, if you didn't know how to say orthopedist, you could just say a specialist of the bones or a specialist of the joints or whatever body part it might be. And then I also gave you the technical name for it, which is ophthalmologo, ophthalmologist. Next one would be an ear, nose, and throat specialist. So this is just like layman's terminology. We're not going to say the technical term because that's a mouthful even in English. So ear, nose, and throat specialist. Un especialista del oído, nariz y garganta. Un especialista del oído, nariz y garganta. So there's that same structure again, a specialist of blank. And in this case, ear, nose, and throat. So there's a few different parts to that. Oído being the functional part of the ear as opposed to the external ear, which is the oreja. So, and then the nariz, which is the nose, and the garganta, which is the throat. An oral surgeon. Un cirujano oral. Un cirujano oral. A dentist. Un dentista. Un dentista. An orthopedist. Un ortopedista. Un ortopedista. So again, a lot of these are kind of a mouthful if you've never learned them before, but just look at the text either on the website or on YouTube, and you can just sound it out very slowly that way and kind of go ortopedista and then gradually speed up and get more practice that way. A cardiologist. Un cardiólogo. Un cardiólogo. A lung specialist. So this more layman's term this time. A lung specialist. Un especialista de los pulmones. Un especialista de los pulmones. So, of course, that's that same structure. A specialist of blank. In this case, the lungs, los pulmones. A general surgeon. Un cirujano general. Un cirujano general. A gastroenterologist, specialist of stomach and intestines. So that's a long sentence. So you can think about just how to say gastroenterologist or specialist of stomach and intestines, but I'll say the whole thing in a minute. Un gastroenterólogo. And then I'll say the second half afterwards. Un gastroenterólogo. Especialista del estómago y los intestinos. Especialista del estómago y los intestinos. So just like in English, you would use your judgment about whether the patient would understand a word like gastroenterologist, right? In English, a lot of people would not understand gastroenterologist, but some people would. If they work in the medical field or if they're pretty educated, then they'd be more likely to understand it. Or if they have experience with it already, obviously, like somebody with Crohn's disease that's already seen a GI doc in the past. So depending on the situation, you might want to just say a specialist of the stomach or say the actual word like gastroenterologist. Next, an obstetrician or pregnancy doctor. Un obstetra, doctor para el embarazo. Un obstetra, doctor para el embarazo. So two different ways to say it again, but this is a little bit shorter than the last one, but still two different ways to say it. Next, a gynecologist. Un ginecólogo. Un ginecólogo. So obviously these tend to be the same person, the OB-GYN specialist. But if it's for pregnancy, you might want to say, pregnancy doctor. And if it's not for pregnancy, you might want to say gynecologist. 'Cause I don't know if there's a Spanish equivalent of the abbreviation OB-GYN like we use in English. So I would just pick whichever one makes the most sense. Next, a urologist, specialist of the urinary tract and genitals. So I'll break that into two parts when we do it, but think of the translation for either a urologist or specialist of the urinary tract and genitals. Un urólogo. Un urólogo. Especialista del tracto urinario y los genitales. Especialista del tracto urinario y los genitales. So that's a lot of words. So maybe you wouldn't use all of those words, but that should give you more than enough to go on if you were talking about that specialty. Next, a dermatologist. Un dermatólogo. Un dermatólogo. So that's the end of the list of specialists, but a couple more phrases here. We will give you the phone number. Le vamos a dar el número de teléfono. Le vamos a dar el número de teléfono. Call as soon as possible. Llame lo más pronto posible. Llame lo más pronto posible. And I think this is the last phrase. It says, we will give you a copy of your test results to take with you to the doctor. So that's really long, so I'll say it one more time. We will give you a copy of your test results to take with you to the doctor. Le vamos a dar una copia de sus resultados para llevar consigo a ese doctor. Le vamos a dar una copia de sus resultados para llevar consigo a ese doctor. So I admit, if you're just listening, it would be hard to remember all of that, but hopefully you could pick out a couple words that were useful to practice. But if you want to see the actual words, then you can look at it on YouTube, and there's a link in the episode description, or you can look at it on my website as well. Okay, I guess there's one more phrase. I think this is the last one. You can follow up with your own doctor if you prefer. Puede dar seguimiento con su propio doctor si prefiere. Puede dar seguimiento con su propio doctor si prefiere. All right, so that was indeed the last phrase. So I've mentioned a couple of times, if you're on the podcast, you can see this on YouTube or on my website if you'd rather see the list. And vice versa. Obviously, if you're on YouTube and you just want to listen to this kind of stuff in the future, you can go subscribe to the podcast. And I also have a CME course that goes through all of the phrases we just did, plus some other stuff. It's mainly designed for emergency room providers. So if that's you, then check it out. You may want to get that because you can get 22 Category 1 CME credits and learn the phrases you need to go through a lot of the common chief complaints in the emergency room, like doing an HPI on common chief complaints like abdominal pain, chest pain, et cetera, and talking through the whole ER visit. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on Learn Medical Spanish.